The air in the Titan Corporation building always felt different after 7 p.m. During the day, it was a roaring beast, full of the sounds of ringing phones, clicking keyboards, and the hurried chatter of people in expensive suits. But at night, the beast went to sleep. The grand lobby, with its shiny marble floors and towering ceiling, became so quiet you could hear the soft hum of the electricity running through the walls. The only light came from the security desk and the pale glow of the moon through the giant windows. This was when his mother's work began. Leo was helping her tonight. His mother was a cleaner for the Titan Corporation. Her hands, though often tired, were capable and strong. She polished the desks of vice presidents and mopped the floors of the boardroom, leaving everything spotless for the next day's battles. Leo, who was on a break from his community college classes, often came to help her. He pushed the heavy cleaning cart for her, stocked with sprays and cloths, feeling like a tiny ant in a giant's palace. He wasn't just a helper, though. Through a special program for employees' families, he had also managed to get a summer job in the company's mailroom. It was a small step up, a chance to wear a collared shirt instead of his usual t-shirt. But in the eyes of the people who worked here, he was still nearly invisible. To them, he was just the maid's son, or the mailroom kid. They would smile politely, sometimes not even that, and look right through him. He didn't mind much. Being invisible meant he could watch and listen, and he was learning more about how the company really worked than any of the new junior managers rushing to their meetings. On this particular night, his mother wasn't feeling well. A bad headache had forced her to rest in one of the empty break rooms. "Leo, be a dear," she had said, her voice soft with weariness. "The executive floor on the 20th needs a quick check. Just make sure there are no leftover cups or papers on the main desks. You remember the way?" He did. He took the service elevator up, the one that smelled faintly of cleaning supplies and didn't have any fancy mirrors. The executive floor was another world. The carpets were thicker, swallowing the sound of his steps. The walls were lined with dark wood, and black and white photographs of serious-looking men looked down on him. His target was the office at the very end of the hall, the biggest one. The office of the man himself, Mr. Alistair Finch, the CEO of Titan. Everyone knew stories about Mr. Finch. He was a legend, a man who had built this company from almost nothing. They said he could look at a spreadsheet for 10 seconds and know exactly which division was failing. They said his temper could make a senior vice president cry. Leo had only ever seen him from a distance, a tall, sharp-suited figure surrounded by nervous-looking people. As Leo approached the giant oak door, he heard something. Voices, muffled but clear. Mr. Finch was still here, and he wasn't alone. Leo's first instinct was to turn around and leave. He had no business being up here, especially with the CEO inside. But as he turned, his shoe made a slight scuffing sound on the deep carpet. He froze, his heart hammering in his chest. If the door opened now, how would he explain himself? He pressed himself against the wall, next to a large potted plant, hoping the shadows would hide him. He decided to wait a minute for the voices to stop. Then he would slip away. But the conversation he heard next made him stay rooted to the spot. "It's not enough." "Charles!" Mr. Finch's voice was low but intense. It wasn't the loud, angry voice from the stories. This was different. It was frustrated, almost tired. "The board, they have a list. They look at Harvard degrees and how much profit someone squeezed out of a department last quarter. They're looking for a clone of me, 20 years younger." There was a murmur from the other man, a calm, older voice that Leo didn't recognize. "They don't understand," Finch continued, and Leo could almost picture him pacing behind his desk. "This company, it's not just a machine to make money. A machine can be run by anyone who knows which buttons to push. But to make it last, to make it truly great, it needs a soul. It needs a heart." Leo held his breath. The heart? What did that mean? "I built this place with a core idea, a principle," Finch went on, his voice dropping even lower as if sharing a deep secret. "I built a heart right into the business, but I never made a big show of it. It's there, quietly beating, making us strong in a way the balance sheets can't show. My successor, my true successor, won't be the one with the best pedigree. It will be the one who proves they understand that. The one who can find that heart and knows how to make the whole company feel its rhythm." The words hung in the silent hallway. They were so different from anything Leo had ever heard in the mailroom or the break rooms. Down there, people only talked about deadlines, sales targets, and impressing the boss. No one talked about a heart. There was a sound of chairs moving. "I should go, Alistair," the other man said. "You think too much." "Someone has to," Finch replied, a hint of his famous sharpness returning. Leo didn't wait another second. As the voices moved toward the door, he turned and practically flew down the hall, his soft-soled shoes making no sound on the carpet. He ducked into a dark conference room just as he heard the oak door creak open behind him. He stood there in the dark, his back against the cool wall, trying to calm his racing pulse. He finished the cleaning quickly, his mind whirring. When he got back to the break room, his mother was feeling a little better. She smiled at him. "All done, my love?" "Yes, Mom," he said, his voice a little distant. "All done." He helped her pack up their things and walked her to the bus stop, his arm linked with hers. But his thoughts were miles away back on the 20th floor. The words of the most powerful man in the building echoed in his mind. A heart, find the heart. For the first time, this giant, intimidating corporation didn't feel like just a cold, impenetrable fortress of glass and steel. It felt like a puzzle, and the most powerful man inside it had just without knowing it, invited the most invisible person in the building to try and solve it. Words from the CEO's office didn't just stay in Leo's head. They moved in and started changing the furniture. For the next few days, he walked through the Titan Corporation building like a man in a dream. The mailroom, with its humming sorting machine and stacks of packages, felt different. The hurried executives rushing past him in the hallways looked different. They were all part of this living, breathing thing Mr. Finch had talked about. But where was its heart? The idea of a heart sounded soft, like something from a children's story. But Leo knew a man like Mr. Finch would never mean it that way. To a man who built empires, the heart had to be something powerful. It had to be the most important hidden reason the company was truly successful. This thought became an itch in his brain that he couldn't scratch. During his lunch breaks, instead of going out with the other mailroom guys, he would sit at his little terminal in the corner. His job was to log incoming and outgoing mail, but the computer system had a little more access than that. He could see internal department codes, project names, and budget allocations if he knew where to look. He started digging. It was like being a detective in his own house. He looked at the big, flashy divisions everyone talked about, the ones that were always in the company newsletter. They were loud and made a lot of money, but they also spent a huge amount and had constant problems. They felt frantic, like they were always running a race. That didn't feel like a steady, strong heartbeat. Then, late one evening, he found it. It was a tiny line in a financial summary, a department called Future Vision. The name sounded fancy, but its budget was small, almost like an afterthought. Curious, he dug deeper. He pulled up old project reports and internal memos that mentioned it. What he discovered was fascinating. While the rest of the company chased quick sales and big one-time deals, Future Vision did the opposite. It focused on a small group of clients and built deep, long-term partnerships. They didn't sell a product and leave. They helped their clients grow slowly and steadily, often making less money up front, but guaranteeing a relationship that lasted for years. They invested in sustainable practices, even when it was more expensive. It was quiet, consistent, and strangely peaceful compared to the chaotic hustle everywhere else, and it was always quietly profitable. Year after year, its reports showed a steady, reliable profit like a calm, strong pulse. It never lost money. It was the company's most reliable earner, and yet nobody ever talked about it. It was like the company's best-kept secret. This is it, Leo thought, a jolt of excitement running through him. This is the heart. It was the part of the business that ensured the company would still be healthy in 10 years, not just next quarter. But knowing it and doing something about it were two very different things. He was a mailroom intern. He had no right to speak about these things. If he went to his direct boss and said, "I think the company's future is in this tiny department," the man would probably just laugh and tell him to focus on sorting the packages. The memory of Mr. Finch's voice came back to him. The one who proves they understand. How could he prove it? The risk was enormous. If he did this wrong, he would be thrown out of the building so fast his head would spin. He would lose his internship, and the embarrassment might even get back to his mother. For a whole week, he wrestled with the decision. He lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling. He was so distracted at work, he almost sent an important legal document to the wrong department. The fear was a heavy weight on his chest, but then he thought about his mother. He saw her getting ready for her night shift, her shoulders a little stooped from a long life of hard work. She never complained. She did what needed to be done, quietly and with dignity. She was the strongest person he knew. Thinking of her gave him a strange kind of courage. He couldn't stay silent. He had to try. He spent the next 3 nights after his mailroom shift was over, working on his plan. He didn't go home. He sat in the empty break room, using his own old laptop, writing down everything he had figured out. He created a simple proposal. He explained how the principles of the little-known future vision department, the long-term partnerships, the sustainable focus, could be used to fix the problems in the company's biggest, most struggling division. He used simple language, like he was explaining it to a friend. He didn't use fancy business words he didn't fully understand. He just laid out the logic, connecting the dots between the quiet success of future vision and the loud failures of the bigger division. It was a bold, almost crazy idea. He was suggesting they take the company's smallest, quietest philosophy and make it its loudest, most important one. When it was finished, he read it over. His hands were shaking. This was it. The point of no return. Getting it to Mr. Finch was the next impossible task. He couldn't just walk up and hand it to him. He couldn't email it. His low-level email address would probably be blocked by the CEO's assistant. Then he remembered. Once, while delivering a stack of urgent envelopes to the executive floor, he had seen a narrow gap at the bottom of Mr. Finch's giant oak door. It was just big enough to slide a few pages through. The next morning, he arrived at work before anyone else. The building was still asleep. The hallways were dark and silent. His heart was pounding so hard he felt sure a security guard would hear it. He walked quickly to the 20th floor, the printed proposal folded in his hand. He stood in front of the oak door, just like he had that night weeks ago. He took a deep breath, remembering his mother's tired but determined face. This was for her, and for a future he couldn't even imagine. He knelt down, the cool marble floor pressing against his knee. He slid the few pages of his proposal under the door. They disappeared into the darkness of the CEO's office. At the top of the first page, he had written a title, "A Proposal for the Company's Heart." And at the very bottom, instead of his name, he had written a single burning question, the same question that had started his whole journey. Is this the heart? He stood up, his legs feeling weak. He had done it. There was no taking it back now. He turned and walked away, not knowing if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life or if he had just taken the first step on an incredible journey. The building was still quiet, but for Leo, a storm had just begun. The 2 days after Leo slid the proposal under the door were the longest of his life. Every time the phone rang in the mailroom, his heart jumped into his throat. Every time the door swung open, he expected to see a stern-faced security guard coming for him. He felt like a mouse that had just rung a bell tied to a sleeping lion's tail, and now he was waiting for the roar. He tried to act normal. He sorted the mail, he delivered packages, he smiled at his coworkers. But inside, his stomach was tied in a tight knot. He replayed his actions over and over in his head. Had he left a fingerprint? Had someone seen him on the security camera? The proposal itself felt like a stupid, childish dream now. Who was he to think he could advise the CEO? On the morning of the 3rd day, the call finally came. It wasn't a security guard, but his direct boss in the mailroom. The man looked nervous himself. "Leo," he said, his voice unusually formal. "You need to go up to the 20th floor. Mr. Finch's executive assistant just called. They want to see you in the CEO's office. Now." The other people in the mailroom stopped what they were doing and stared at him. A call from the 20th floor was rare. A call to the CEO's office was unheard of. Their looks were a mix of confusion and pity, as if he were a prisoner being called to the warden's office. Leo's mouth went dry. This was it. He was going to be fired, and his mother would lose her job too, all because of his foolishness. The walk to the elevator felt like a walk to the gallows. The ride up to the 20th floor was silent and heavy. The doors opened onto the plush, quiet carpet of the executive floor. The CEO's assistant, a woman with sharp eyes and a perfectly still expression, pointed him towards the famous oak door. "Go on in, he's expecting you." Leo pushed the door open. The office was enormous, with a breathtaking view of the city spread out like a toy model behind the desk. But Leo's eyes were fixed on the man sitting at that desk. Mr. Alistair Finch was even more imposing up close. He wasn't a large man, but he had a presence that filled the room. He was leaning back in his leather chair, and on the desk in front of him, lying right in the center, was Leo's proposal. The door clicked shut behind Leo, sealing him in. For a long moment, Mr. Finch said nothing. He just looked at Leo, his eyes scanning him from his cheap shoes to his nervous face. It was a look that seemed to measure his worth and find it lacking. "So," Mr. Finch said finally. His voice was calm, which was somehow more frightening than if he had been shouting. "You're the ghost in my machine." Leo didn't know what to say, so he just stood there. Mr. Finch picked up the papers. This appeared under my door, a proposal, from a mailroom intern." He said the words, "mailroom intern," not with curiosity, but with a kind of cold disbelief. "You eavesdropped on a private conversation. Then you used company resources to dig up confidential financial data. And then you have the audacity to slide this under my door. Do you have any idea how many rules you've broken?" Leo felt his face grow hot. This was worse than he had imagined. I know, sir. I'm sorry for eavesdropping. That was wrong. But the data, I only used the system access I had from my job. I didn't hack anything." "Don't correct me," Finch said, his voice hardening just enough to make Leo flinch. He stood up and started pacing slowly around the desk like a shark circling its prey. "You think because you heard me talking about a heart, you understand my company? You think a few weeks pushing a mail cart makes you an expert on corporate strategy?" "No, sir," Leo said, his voice barely a whisper. "Then explain yourself," Finch demanded, stopping directly in front of him. "What gave you the right? And you will look me in the eye when you answer." Leo forced himself to lift his head and meet the CEO's intense gaze. He was terrified, but he remembered why he had done it. He thought of the quiet, steady success of the Future Vision Project, the heart he truly believed in. "The conversation, sir, it was an accident," Leo began, his voice shaking but clear. "But when I heard you, it was the first time this place didn't feel like just a machine. It felt like a puzzle. And you said the next leader had to find the heart. So, I looked for it. I didn't do it to be disrespectful. I did it because it felt important. More important than just sorting mail." He took a shaky breath and pointed to the proposal on the desk. "Future Vision. It works. It's the only part of the company that's never lost money. It builds relationships, not just transactions. That's its strength. That's the heart. And I just thought, if that strength could be applied to the bigger divisions, it could make the whole company stronger, not just for a quarter, but for years." Mr. Finch listened, his expression unreadable. He didn't interrupt. When Leo finished, the room was silent again. The CEO walked back to his chair and sat down, steepling his fingers. "You took a massive risk," he said, his tone shifting from hostile to brutally analytical. "You broke protocol. You overstepped every boundary imaginable. Most people in your position would have kept their head down and done their job. Why didn't you?" Leo thought about his mother, about the quiet determination she showed every single day. "Because sometimes, sir, just doing your job isn't enough. Sometimes you have to do what you think is right, even if it's scary." A long, heavy silence filled the room. Leo felt like he was waiting for a judge to pronounce a sentence. Finally, Mr. Finch spoke. "I am going to give you a choice," he said. "Option 1, you go back downstairs to the mailroom, you finish your internship, you never speak of this again, and we both pretend this never happened." It was the safe way out, the easy way. Leo could almost feel the relief washing over him. But he waited. He knew there was a second option. Option 2, Finch continued, his eyes locking with Leo's. "You accept a new position. You become my special assistant. But let me be very clear about what that means. It will not be a promotion. It will be a trial by fire. I will give you tasks that are too difficult for you. I will question your every decision. The other executives, the people who have worked here for 20 years, they will see you as a target. They will hate you. They will try to break you. Every day will be a test. And if you fail, and you will be tempted to fail, you will be out. Not just from this job, but from this building. For good." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "So, what is it? Do you go back to the safety of the shadows? Or do you step into the light where everyone will be waiting to watch you burn?" Leo's mind was racing. The first option was safe. The second option was professional suicide. But then he thought about the puzzle. He thought about the heart of the company. He had found it once. Maybe, just maybe, he could help it beat louder. He looked at Mr. Finch, his own fear now mixed with a spark of defiance. "I'll take the trial by fire, sir." The news that the mailroom kid was now the CEO's special assistant spread through the Titan Corporation like a wildfire. It started as a shocked whisper in the mailroom, grew into confused chatter in the hallways, and by lunchtime, it was the only thing anyone in the entire building was talking about. For Leo, the new job felt less like an office and more like a lion's den, and he was the piece of meat thrown into the middle of it. His new desk was a small, lonely one placed just outside Mr. Finch's enormous office. It was supposed to be a position of honor, but it felt like being on display. People walking past would slow down, staring at him with open curiosity or thinly veiled disgust. He heard the murmurs. "Must be some kind of relative. I heard Finch felt sorry for his mother. The cleaner. He won't last a week. The worst of it came from the executives. The men and women in sharp suits who had spent years climbing the corporate ladder. They saw Leo as a joke, an insult to all their hard work. The leader of this group was a man named David Sterling, a top executive who was tall, handsome, and had a smile that never reached his cold eyes. He was the one everyone assumed would be the next CEO. On Leo's first day, Sterling walked up to his new desk. He didn't say hello. He just dropped a thick, dusty stack of files onto Leo's clean desk, making a loud thud. "Welcome to the big leagues, kid," Sterling said, his voice slick and mocking. "Finch wants a full analysis on these 10 years of shipping logistics data. He needs it by tomorrow morning. I'm sure a sharp guy like you won't have any problem." It was an impossible task. The files were a mountain of confusing numbers and technical terms Leo had never seen before. It was clearly designed to make him fail, and fail publicly, and Mr. Finch was no help at all. The CEO was a merciless teacher. He would give Leo a complex report, and then, an hour later, storm out of his office and demand a summary. When Leo, his hands shaking, tried to explain what he'd read, Finch would cut him off. "Wrong," he would snap. "You're looking at the symptoms, not the disease. Think, what is the core problem here? If you can't see it, you're useless to me." He would then turn around and go back into his office, leaving Leo feeling small and stupid. It was a brutal game, and Leo was losing badly. He worked late every night, his eyes burning from reading computer screens, his mind dizzy with information he didn't fully understand. He felt like an imposter, and everyone could see it. The breaking point came a few weeks in. Sterling gave him a simple-sounding task. Prepare the financial slides for a big client presentation. Leo worked all night on it, checking every number twice. But during the presentation, one of the charts was wrong. A decimal point was in the wrong place, making a number look 10 times bigger than it was. It was a tiny mistake, but in a room full of important clients, it was a disaster. Mr. Finch's face turned to stone. Sterling stood up, feigning shock and disappointment. "I am so sorry, everyone," he said, looking directly at Leo. It seems our new special assistant hasn't quite mastered the basics. My team will get you the correct numbers immediately. Later, in Finch's office, the air was icy. Sterling was there, his arms crossed. "This is exactly what I was worried about, Alistair," Sterling said, using the CEO's first name to show how close they were. "He's in over his head. This kind of amateur mistake makes the whole company look bad. I think we all know what needs to be done." Leo stood there, his heart sinking. This was it. He was about to be fired. He had failed. He wanted to explain that he'd double-checked the numbers, that the file Sterling had given him must have been altered, but it sounded like a weak excuse even to him. Who would believe the mailroom kid over a top executive? But in that moment of despair, Leo remembered his old life. He remembered the mailroom and the cleaning staff and the security guards. These were the people who really knew how the building worked. They were the ones who saw everything, heard everything, and were trusted by no one. He was one of them. And he had forgotten that. He didn't argue with Sterling or beg Mr. Finch for another chance. He just walked out of the office. But he didn't go home. He went down to the basement to the IT department. He found a friendly technician he sometimes ate lunch with. He didn't accuse anyone. He just asked a simple question. "Hey, for my own learning, is there a way to see the history of a file? Like, if someone made a change to a PowerPoint slide, could you see the old version?" The IT guy smiled. "Of course. The system automatically saves backup versions. Let's take a look." A few clicks later, they found it. The original file Leo had worked on had been perfect. But a later version, saved from Sterling's personal computer login, showed the decimal point had been moved. It was sabotage. Leo didn't go back to Mr. Finch screaming about a conspiracy. Instead, he calmly printed out both versions of the file history. Then he went and found the junior analyst who had originally compiled the correct numbers for Sterling's team. The young woman was nervous, but Leo, speaking to her as a fellow outsider, gently asked if she remembered sending the final numbers to Sterling. She confirmed she had, and even showed him her email. Leo had all the proof he needed. He walked back into Mr. Finch's office, where Sterling was still gloating. He placed the printed pages on the CEO's desk without a word. Finch looked at them. His eyes moved from the paper to Sterling's face and then back to Leo. He understood everything instantly. "David," Mr. Finch said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Get out of my office." Sterling's smug smile vanished. He tried to speak, but one look from Finch silenced him. He left, his face pale with rage. Finch looked at Leo for a long time. This time his gaze was different. It wasn't approval, but it was the first sign of respect. "You didn't come in here crying," Finch observed. "You didn't make excuses. You went and found the truth. You used your resources." Leo finally spoke. "The people everyone looks down on, sir. They see everything. I just asked them." Mr. Finch gave a slow, single nod. The lesson was learned. Leo had survived his first real attack not by fighting like an executive, but by thinking like the person he used to be. He had learned that his real strength wasn't in trying to be one of them, but in remembering where he came from. The war was far from over, but he had just won a crucial battle, and he had done it without becoming like his enemies. The victory over the executive, David Sterling, did not make Leo's life easier. If anything, it made the target on his back even bigger. Sterling and his friends were now more careful, but they were also more determined to see him fail. The constant pressure was like a heavy weight Leo had to carry with him every single day, but something inside him had changed. He had learned to stand his ground. He no longer jumped at every sharp word from Mr. Finch. He started to understand that the CEO's brutal questions weren't just meant to break him, but to force him to think deeper, to see the patterns others missed. It was a painful way to learn, but he was learning. He also stopped trying to work alone. He remembered the lesson from the IT department. The real power in the company wasn't just at the top. It was in the veins of the building, the people who kept it running. He started to build his own quiet network. During his lunch breaks, he no longer ate at his desk. He would go to the big cafeteria and sit with the junior analysts, the secretaries, and the people from the accounting department. He didn't pretend to be a big shot. He was just Leo. He would listen to their stories, their frustrations about projects, their ideas that never got heard by the bosses. He learned which managers were good at their jobs and which ones just took credit for other people's work. He learned which projects were actually successful and which ones were just fancy-looking failures. He became friends with the woman who managed the main company calendar. She knew where every important person was at any given time. He chatted with the security guards at the front desk, who saw who came in late, who left early, and who looked stressed. He built a web of trust with people who were, like he once was, completely invisible to the executives in their glass offices. This network became his secret weapon. He started to know things before anyone else did. He could sense a problem in a department before it became a crisis. When Mr. Finch gave him a difficult task, Leo could quietly find the right person to ask for help, someone with real, on-the-ground knowledge. He was no longer just the mailroom kid pretending to be an executive. He was becoming a bridge between the top floor and the rest of the company. Then, the storm hit. News exploded through the building one Tuesday morning. A rival corporation, a giant known for swallowing up other companies, had made a surprise move. They were launching a hostile takeover of Titan. They wanted to buy enough company stock to take control, and then they would likely tear it apart, selling off the pieces for a quick profit. Panic spread through the offices. People were scared for their jobs. The stock price began to fall. The board of directors was called for an emergency meeting. The air in the building was thick with fear. In the war room, a tense meeting was held with all the top executives. Mr. Finch sat at the head of the table, his face like granite. David Sterling was the first to speak, his voice loud and confident. "The solution is simple, Alistair," Sterling said, pointing at a graph on the screen. "We have to become lean and mean. We cut costs, deep immediate layoffs. We slash our spending on research and those long-term projects that don't make money right now. We show the market we can be ruthless and profitable. That's the only language these predators understand." Heads around the table nodded. It was the traditional, brutal response. It was about survival, even if it meant sacrificing hundreds of employees. Mr. Finch listened, his expression unreadable. Then he turned his gaze to Leo, who was sitting quietly in the corner. "What about you?" Finch asked, his voice cutting through the room. "You've been quiet. What's your solution?" All eyes turned to Leo. He saw the disdain on Sterling's face, the skepticism on the others. He felt a familiar knot of fear in his stomach. But then he thought about the heart of the company. He thought about the Future Vision project, quietly and steadily making money by building trust. He thought about all the people in his network, the real people who would lose their jobs with Sterling's plan. He took a deep breath and stood up. "I think that's the wrong way," Leo said, his voice clear and steady, surprising even himself. "If we do that, we become a smaller, weaker version of the company they want to take over. We're cutting out our own heart." Sterling let out a short, mocking laugh. "Here we go again with the poetry. We need action, not philosophy." Leo ignored him and walked to the front of the room. He plugged his own laptop into the projector. "My proposal is the opposite," he said. "We don't shrink. We grow. We don't hide our heart. We show it to the world." He began to present his plan. It was the same idea from his original proposal, but now it was detailed, backed by numbers and a clear strategy. He argued that instead of cutting the Future Vision model, they should double down on it. They should announce a massive new investment in their long-term client partnerships and sustainable projects. They should show the world that Titan's real value wasn't in its next quarterly report, but in its unbreakable relationships and its vision for the future. "This will make us stronger, not weaker," Leo explained. "It will show our shareholders we have a plan for the next 20 years, not just the next 20 days. It will make us unique. It will make us worth more than just the sum of our parts." The room was silent for a moment and then erupted into noise. Most of the executives were shaking their heads. They called it a foolish, naive fantasy. They said it was a suicide mission. "He's asking us to bet the entire company on a feel-good story," one of them shouted. Through it all, Mr. Finch was silent, just watching. He watched Leo defend his idea with a passion the young man had never shown before. He watched him use data he had gathered from his network of junior staff, data that the executives had never even seen. Leo wasn't just giving a presentation. He was fighting for the soul of the company. When the room finally quieted down, everyone looked at the CEO. The future of Titan hung in the balance. Mr. Finch stood up slowly. He looked around the table at his veteran executives, and then his eyes settled on Leo. "For years," Finch began, his voice low but powerful, "I have talked about this company having a heart. You all nodded and smiled, but I don't think you ever really believed me. You thought it was a metaphor?" He walked over to the screen where Leo's plan was still displayed. "This," he said, pointing at it, "is not a feel-good story. This is a battle plan. It's the only plan I've heard today that isn't about surrendering who we are. It's about reminding everyone why we are great." He turned to the board, his decision made. "We will follow this plan," he declared. "We will fight not by becoming like our enemy, but by being more ourselves than we have ever been before." The room was stunned into silence. David Sterling's face was a mask of pure fury. Leo felt a wave of exhaustion and disbelief. He had done it. He had convinced the most powerful man in the company to take the biggest risk of its history. The real battle was just beginning, but for the first time they were fighting for something real. The weeks that followed the CEO's decision were the most intense the Titan Corporation had ever seen. It was like the whole company was a ship sailing straight into a hurricane. Leo's plan was put into action, but it wasn't a magic wand. The stock price dipped even lower at first. News commentators on television laughed at the strategy, calling it a desperate fairy tale. The rival company grew more confident, increasing their offers to buy Titan's shares. Inside the building, the pressure was immense. David Sterling and his group of executives did little to hide their anger. They followed the orders, but they moved slowly, dragging their feet, waiting for the plan to fail so they could say, "We told you so." But a strange thing began to happen. While the people at the top were fighting, the people in the middle and bottom of the company started to wake up. They heard about the new strategy, the one that focused on long-term partnerships and protecting jobs. For the first time in a long time, they felt like the company was fighting for them. Not just for money, and they remembered the young man who had proposed it, the one who used to eat lunch with them, who remembered their names, who listened to their ideas. Leo's quiet network, the one he had built over months of genuine connection, suddenly became the company's nervous system. The junior analysts worked late nights, not because they were ordered to, but because they believed in the mission. They found new efficiencies, small ways to save money that made the big plan more affordable. The salespeople, inspired by the new direction, started talking to clients with a new passion. And a few key clients, tired of the usual cutthroat business, decided to stick with Titan because of its new vision. It was a slow, steady push against the tide. Leo was at the center of it all, guided by Mr. Finch. He was no longer just an assistant. He was a conductor, coordinating between different departments, solving problems, and keeping the spirit of the plan alive. He was tired, but for the first time he felt like he was doing the work he was meant to do. Then the turn came. A major business magazine, which had been critical at first, published a long article. It was titled, "The Company with a Soul: How Titan is Betting on People Over Profit." The article praised the bold strategy and highlighted how it was creating a new, loyal culture. Then, a famous and respected investor went on television and said he was buying Titan's stock specifically because of its new long-term vision. "Everyone else is playing checkers," he said. "Titan is playing chess." Slowly, then all at once, the mood changed. The stock price didn't just stop falling. It began to climb. It climbed higher than it had been before the takeover threat. The rival company, realizing that Titan was now more valuable and stronger than ever, quietly withdrew its offer. The storm was over. Titan had not only survived, it had emerged stronger, more respected, and more united than anyone could have imagined. A few months later, the main hall of the Titan Corporation was packed. Every single employee was there, from the board of directors in their finest suits to the cleaning staff in their comfortable shoes. It was the annual shareholder meeting, but it felt like a celebration. The air buzzed with excitement and relief. Mr. Alistair Finch walked onto the stage. The room fell silent. He looked older, but there was a calm, proud light in his eyes that people hadn't seen in years. He began by talking about the company's history, about building it from nothing. Then he talked about the recent battle for its survival. The audience listened, captivated. Many of you believed our victory was because of a clever financial trick, Finch said, his voice echoing in the quiet hall. It wasn't. Our victory came from remembering who we are. He then began to tell a story. He told them about a night over a year ago when he had a private conversation about finding a successor. He spoke of his belief that the next leader needed to find the company's hidden heart. The next day, Finch continued, a proposal was slid under my door. It was anonymous. It was from someone who had overheard me, and it contained the clearest, most intelligent understanding of this company's potential I had ever read. A soft murmur went through the crowd. I found the author. It was a young man working in the mailroom, the son of one of our own cleaners. He paused, letting the significance of that sink in. When I confronted him, he didn't make excuses. He stood his ground. He had a fire in him. I decided to test that fire. I put him through hell because this job is hell. I watched as others in this very room tried to break him, to sabotage him, to make him quit. He looked directly at David Sterling, who was sitting in the front row, staring at his shoes. But he didn't quit, Finch said, his voice growing stronger. He learned, he grew, and when this company faced its greatest ever threat, it was this young man, not the seasoned executives, who presented the plan that saved us. He didn't find that plan in a textbook. He found it by talking to you, by listening to the people who really make this company work. He proved that the true strength of a leader isn't in his title, but in his understanding, and in his heart. Finch turned and looked to the side of the stage. It is with more pride than I can possibly express that I announce my retirement. And it is my final and greatest act as your CEO to name my successor. He took a deep breath. The entire hall held theirs. The next chief executive officer of the Titan Corporation is Leo. For a second, there was a stunned silence. Then the room exploded. It wasn't just polite applause. It was a roaring wave of cheers and shouts. People jumped to their feet. The junior staff, the secretaries, the IT team, they were the loudest, their faces alight with joy and vindication. They were cheering for one of their own. Leo, who had been waiting nervously backstage, walked out. He looked out at the sea of standing, cheering people. He saw his former boss from the mailroom, clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. He saw the woman from the calendar department, wiping tears from her eyes. And then he found her. In the very back of the hall, standing quietly by the wall, was his mother. She wasn't cheering loudly. She just had her hands clasped under her chin, and her face was shining with a love and a pride so bright it could have lit up the whole city. He walked to the microphone, his own eyes glistening. The cheers slowly died down. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't have a big speech. I just want to say that my mother taught me that no job is too small to be done with pride. And she also taught me that no person is too small to dream a big dream. He looked at Mr. Finch, who gave him a slow, respectful nod. "This company has a heart," Leo said, his voice growing steadier. "I just helped everyone remember it was there. And I promise you, I will spend every day making sure it keeps beating, strong and loud for all of us." As the cheers rose up again, filling the hall, it was clear this was more than a change of CEO. It was the beginning of a new era, one that proved that sometimes the person best suited to lead a giant corporation isn't the one who started at the top, but the one who understood it from the very bottom.